Bojack Horseman released in 2014 and ran for 6 wonderful seasons. And if it was released today, it would have probably ran for 2. The scenario I described has sadly become the norm for many animated shows over the past few years, which is part of the reason why indie animation has taken off. And one of the most prominent shows to come from indie animation is Helluva Boss. It was once a pretty decent show, but ever since season 2, it's been pretty much all downhill, especially in the second half. The creator, Pop, has stated in many interviews that she takes a lot of inspiration from Bojack. But I failed to see any of that inspiration in her work, because Bojack Horseman is everything Helluva Boss wishes it could be. Bojack Horseman is about a washed-up Hollywood star attempting to regain his stardom, and Helluva Boss is about demons of the lower class running a murder business. Or at least it was. Most of season 1 followed this assassin business premise, but suddenly by episode 8, Viv decided that from now on, Stolas is suddenly going to develop feelings for Blitz, despite the fact that for most of the season, Stolas was very creepy and abusive towards him, and showed zero signs of genuine affection or love. And so, slowly but surely, Helluva Boss had since devolved into the Stolas show, with the original premise becoming almost completely irrelevant, except in tiny, insignificant doses. Even episodes that aren't about or don't heavily involve the stupid-ass Owler ship have it shoehorned in there somewhere. In Bojack, various new plotlines are introduced and go beyond the primary premise, and the status quo changes every season. However, these plotlines either tie into it one way or another, or have an actual believable in-universe explanation, and are actually engaging in their own right. For example, why does Diane go to Cordovia in season 2? Because she got publicity from One Trick Pony, a book Bojack wanted written to get his fame back. Sometimes the reasonings can be quite wacky, like Todd becoming governor by accidentally winning a race, and in cases like Herb's actual cause of death, too wacky. But whether comedic or realistic, everything in Bojack Horseman has a purpose and reasoning for happening. Bojack earns its status quo changes. Each season, the penultimate episode 11 is often the one where the bombshells are dropped and the 360s are pulled. But they feel earned because the show goes out of its way to subtly put in sprinkles of what's to come over the course of the season, and ties all of these elements near seamlessly together by that aforementioned episode 11. Helluva has set up arcs with a lot of potential, but completely squandered them in the end. Either that, or the writers just decide one day that Loona will get this weird-looking all-force transformation. I could go on for hours about the characters of Helluva Boss and how Bojack blows them out of the water in every way. But we'd be here all day, so I'll mostly just be sticking with the main cast. To start, let's begin with Helluva and Blitz. Season 1 indicated towards many interesting directions for his character, particularly in Truth Seekers and Lululand. Truth Seekers has Moxxie and Blitz having a heart-to-heart, where Blitz actually expresses some genuine kindness to him. And in Lululand, RoboFizz mocks Blitz and pokes fun at his self-loathing, both things we would see the actual Fizz do. He knows how to provoke Blitz too well, definitely has known and now resents Blitz for something. But Blitz and Moxxie's conversation might as well have never happened, because Blitz goes back to treating Moxxie like garbage by the next episode. Blitz's fears about loving people is also something that ends up going nowhere. And Fizz? He was handled even worse. You see, when he was a kid, Blitz accidentally caused a fire in the circus, one that Fizz got caught in. But rather than try to save him, Blitz just ran away, leaving Fizz exposed to the fire long enough to lose his limbs. What Blitz did was horrible and extremely cowardly. Fizz calls Blitz out on this a little bit. But then Blitz started attempting to deflect the blame off himself and dismissing Fizz's pain, and yet we're supposed to view Blitz as the more sympathetic. Bojack acts similarly when, quote-unquote, apologizing to Herb for abandoning him for 20 years following the latter being fired from horsing around. But the key difference between these two scenes is that the narrative scrutinizes Bojack for acting like this. It doesn't try to give him any flimsy excuses, and the focus throughout almost the entire scene remains on how he betrayed Herb. Herb never forgives Bojack for abandoning him either, whereas Blitz saves Fizz once, and that's enough for Fizz to forgive Blitz for all the physical and emotional trauma he gave him. Incredible. The thing about Blitz's character is that the narrative villainizes him for all the wrong reasons. Abandoning Fizz in the fire and never contacting him for years is downplayed because it was an accident, there was a misunderstanding. As is stalking and harassing Moxxie and Millie, which is played for laughs. But he is treated as the bad guy when it comes to Stolas, who Blitz is actually a victim of. Up next are the M&Ms, Moxxie and Millie. Most of the time, Moxxie's usually just kinda there, acting as a straight man and getting shut down by Blitz. They try to flesh him out by making him the son of an abusive mod boss, but it didn't do much in making him more interesting because of how inconsequential it's been to his character. His role in the series is just Blitz's personal punching bag, which Moxxie never confronts him about. Meanwhile in Bojack, Todd gets into various misadventures, but there's enough variety for them to withstand long term. Backstory of getting kicked out of his house by his mom after becoming a high school dropout gives the audience context for why he crashed with Bojack for so long. Being that Todd wouldn't have anywhere else to go if he didn't. He also gets to feel betrayed when Bojack sabotages his rock opera and gets him re-addicted to gaming. Everything isn't just immediately okay once the Hollywood D movie drama's resolved. Now, Todd is eventually okay with Bojack again, but he once again remains hesitant when the improv cult leader brings up how Bojack never treated him well. It's not until Bojack, in that moment, is remorseful and proclaims Todd as his best friend that he comes back. But when Bojack screws up again big time in season 3, Todd leaves him and it's treated as the right thing to do. After this, we get some really nice development for Todd, with him discovering his place in the world, learning to prioritize himself, and reconciling with his family. He gets to be fleshed out as his own character, and while he and Bojack become friends again, it's not immediate and takes time. And Millie, as many have pointed out, doesn't have much personality beyond being Moxxie's wife and violent. The show tries to flesh Millie out by building the idea of her secretly feeling insecure about herself and her capabilities, twice actually, with X's and O's and Ghostbusters. But it again didn't work because the show never bothered to continue with this contextualization after X's and O's until Ghostbusters. But even there, her backstory is used far more as a means for Blitz's character development rather than her own. Loona, I don't like her. The vast majority of the time, she just bitches about everyone and everything, and that's her entire character. She softens up a bit around the end of the season, and even has some new friends. However, we as an audience don't get to see any of that growth, because the Wattpad Yowie Fest is so much more important. I haven't had all that much to say on Millie and Loona, but that's simply because the show doesn't give me much to say on them. Female characters in Helluva Boss are one-note and shallow. The female characters in Bojack Horseman are not like that. From Diane's desire to rise against the trauma she endured from her family, Princess Carolyn's life as an agent, her struggle to become a mom, Sarah Lynn being forced into stardom from a young age when all she ever wanted was to be an architect. Women in Bojack Horseman are multi-layered and complex characters, with arcs and conflicts of their own. They have depth and stuff about them that viewers can analyze and appreciate, whereas the female characters of Helluva Boss have none. The most egregious example of how Helluva Boss fails at writing female characters is Stella, who, according to Viv, is meant to be inspired by Beatrice Horseman. Bea had 2 whole episodes dedicated to showing her past and why she became the way she is. They humanized Beatrice and acknowledged that although she is an awful person and parent, what she endured was extremely tragic. Beatrice is also a far better depiction of an abuser. She spent years psychologically abusing Bojack, tying his worth to his ability to perform, and purposely planting this idea into his head that he ruined everything and shouldn't have been born. Stella? She is so unsubtly and comically rude that it feels like the show is shaking the viewers and yelling, "Look at how much Stella sucks! Do you hate her yet? Do you?" It's absurd how Helluva Boss, a show where all but one of the 7 deadly sins introduced thus far are presented as good, refuses to give any depth or insight into Stella as a character. We know she was arranged to marry Stolas, and that both of them had zero say in the matter, but the show is only interested in highlighting how much it sucks for Stolas. Speaking of which, lastly is Stolas. Easily the worst character in the entire show. I hate this guy with a burning passion. Now, from a writing standpoint, he and Blitz's whole thing made sense. Blitz needed the Grimoire to run the business, but Stolas, being the
pompous, rich asshole,
that he is, would only give Blitz the book if they got in bed together every month. Their relationship is built on coercion, and Stolas not only knows that, but revels in it, as well as in the fact that he is of much higher status than Blitz, and uses that as a means to constantly look down upon and degrade Blitz, call him things such as little or impish plaything, pull on his face, etc. This is an extremely gross and messed up dynamic, and while I'm not a fan of Stolas suddenly falling in love with Blitz and Aussies, I do appreciate that he's called out for his behavior. The ending of that episode very much indicated towards him learning to be a better person. But then in Season 2, every situation in which Stolas was the one in the wrong has been retconned and rewritten into making him the victim. Like his treatment of Blitz. It's completely swept under the rug because Stolas does love him, guys, and Blitz is too much of a dummy to realize that. Oh no, Blitz was so evil to poor innocent Stolas. By the end of the season, Blitz essentially became Stolas' caretaker, and it was a very, very cringe. Stolas responds to this undeserved generosity by acting like a whiny twat and throwing a tantrum because he has to work now.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Or what about him neglecting Octavia in favor of being horny for Blitz? Well, actually, Octavia needs to cut her dad some slack because he's trying. Which, no, not really. Stolas literally decides on the whim to go execute himself for Blitz, single-handedly breaking the promise he made to Via about never leaving her for him. It's only after he loses his powers that he brings her up. Octavia rightfully calls Stolas out for this in Sinsmas, though in the end she is, unsurprisingly, framed in the wrong because it involves poor baby Stolas facing the consequences of his actions. Nah, because Bojack Horseman, the show, takes the mentality of one suddenly becoming the victim when being held accountable and laughs in its face. Time and time again, Bojack is called out for his refusal to take responsibility for his actions. Said actions all come back to bite him in the ass one way or another. But he isn't rewarded 5 seconds later with one of his victims becoming his butler. Mr. Peanutbutter is another example of how Bojack Horseman actually allows its characters to grow. Mr. Peanutbutter rarely has malicious intent, and does care about others. But his inability to listen to his partners and mentality of a grand gesture solving the actual problem cost him his romantic relationships, including his with Diane. The narrative has Mr. Peanutbutter realize this and change though, and while he and Diane don't get back together, they remain good friends. It feels earned because Mr. Peanutbutter reflected on his behavior, and we as an audience got to see his development unfold. And Bojack himself is allowed to express resentment towards his mom without being villainized for it. His ultimate decision in choosing to comfort his mom before she succumbed to her dementia over giving the fuck you he wanted is presented as his choice. In many ways, Stolas is everything wrong with Helluva Boss as a series, which itself is the anti-Bojack Horseman. It is a series where characters can do shitty things and then feel bad about themselves like that makes it okay. Bojack Horseman is a show that does the complete opposite. It is a masterpiece of animation and television as a whole. It has flaws, as all media does, but at its core, it is a show that prioritizes rich, creative storytelling over cheap fan service. Viv has failed to understand the many reasons as to why Bojack Horseman is everything that Helluva Boss is not.